Welcome to Peer Recovery Coaches, Ethics and Boundaries. Let's get started. Why am I here? Maybe y'all already know me, but I got to set the table. I'm a person thriving in sustained recovery from severe mental and substance use disorders. About 6 years into my recovery, I decided to enter into the field, to professionalize my helping others to find wellness and happiness, and that's where I started. My direct practice started in OTP, an opioid treatment program. Then I transitioned to a long-term social model residential 12-step program. Then we opened up a recovery community center, peer recovery organization, and I did that. And then I directed our state's Addiction Professional Trade Association, where we included peers, and I advocated for peers to be meaningfully included and supported and respected in all areas of the behavioral health continuum of care. And reckon around 6 years ago, I started getting into national training and technical assistance with JBS, and I dig it. And so that's why I'm here. Today, I hope to set the table, with a few things, but I'm going to be interactive while we're setting the table too. What I want to cover are a few things and hand a couple tools out, but I'm hoping to hear from y'all what you're doing around helping peer recovery coaches or yourselves to set boundaries with your participant, patient, client, peer population. How you discuss ethics in your organization and learn to align your practice and missions with the ethics of your credentials, your organization, your personal lived expertise and values. I really want to dig in briefly into the difference between beliefs and values, because I believe, and that belief could be proven wrong. And there's the point. I believe that our conflating beliefs with values is getting us into a little bit of trouble when it comes to peer recovery coaching. And I think that we all have some exquisite values, and sometimes our beliefs may misalign our practice from those values, but we don't know it when it's happening. I'm speaking from my own experience. As a person who's been doing this for over 15 years, I have caused harm in the name of help, and upon reflection in my practice, I see where I was in error, and it improves my practice today. And I try to share with folks as much as possible as a peer to say, this is where I went. Don't step in that hole. Cool? Thumbs up. Well, boundaries. Let's talk about that first. And there's no wrong answer, so feel free to unmute yourself. Tell me, what's a boundary? Be brave. Stretch. Type it in if you're particularly anxious about hollering into the mic. What is a boundary? I see Larry's typing. Okay, one big one is not giving out your personal cell number. So Larry has talked about a limitation on what you'll do, personal limitation. Erica's talking about time and space.
I'll yell into the mic. It's Charlie.
Charlie.
Whenever are you wanting an example of boundary, or what is like boundary?
Let's define boundaries.
Okay, to me, it is something that we use to protect ourselves and our policies, our recovery, not to control others.
Ooh, so you're protecting yourself, you're protecting others, maybe protecting your organization, protecting the workforce as a whole, all these potential iatrogenic harms that could be caused with boundaries. All right, let's jump right into that. That's great examples, great definition. Let's come together on consensus. This is what I have. Limits and guidelines we set in relationships to protect our own well-being and the well-being of others, healthy, professional, respectful dynamic between peers, between the peer and the peer helper, the peer recovery coach. Excellent. All right, next, ethics. Define ethics for me. And we are talking about professional ethics, but you can mention other ethics if you want to. There's no wrong answer.
I will jump in, Donald. I think ethics are the guidelines by which uh, we practice and provide services. So I think they're also designed to protect those that we serve, as well as protect ourselves.
Okay. So some guidelines, maybe even some rules around guiding our practice once again to minimize harm and maximize benefit. Everybody down with that? Let's get on the same page. I put down formal principles, standards, guide behavior within a professional context. Our codes of conduct with your credential, those of you all who are credentialed or have folks working with you who are credentialed at peers, you know, every 2 years we have to get a number of CEs and they have to include our ethics, and many of us have to sign once again our commitment to those ethical codes, right? What is right or wrong within a role in an organization. Very cool. All right, what is the next one? The next one is values. What are values? Who has any values in here? What's the value underpinning peerness, peer support? Deeply
Can I play
held.
along?
What's that?
Can I play along?
Of course.
One definition of a value is something that you select either as an individual, family, it may come from a community or a system of belief that you uphold as a high principle.
A high principle. Right. And deeply held beliefs, Whitney, you say. All right. And we do entangle these two words together because even in my definition of value, a belief comes into play. But the value underpinning that belief is what's super important. So, what did Whitney? They guide how we think, act, and make decisions. Here's what I have: deeply held personal beliefs about what is important or meaningful. Where do we get them from? We're socialized. We get them from our family. We get them from our own bumps in the road, wins and losses, from our spirituality and our personal identity. They influence our decisions. Values don't always drive the bus, though. They go into the mix, they go into the tumbler, and we come out with decisions on the other side. All right, now contrasting beliefs with values. What do you think a belief is in contrast to values? Larry, typing away. And I'll tell you, in my 15-year career, I have had a dozen beliefs displaced by new information and new experiences. Yet the value that I placed upon them remained. That's heavy, Larry. Belief could be like what we feel is right and wrong, right? Accept as true, maybe even without proof, a little faith, right on. Or maybe even we have some proof, but maybe that proof is transient and we get new proof coming in. Okay, assumptions about what we believe to be true, about the world, about people, about recovery, about ourselves, personal experience, family, religion, society. Mindful not to conflate, and that means to fuse together as meaning the same thing, beliefs and values. It is my contention that we all hold beliefs, and we're going to talk about some examples in peer recovery support services that we held to be gospel in treatment and recovery support services, and even in the prevention space, and have learned over time, new research, new information, our exploring biases we may have and start to dismantle those, and we believe very differently, but we still hold these values underpinning them. Right on. So, what I want to do now is stop sharing for a minute. Everybody sees me. I'm running over to my Adobe Acrobat here. All right, let's talk about some beliefs, because this is a family-centered peer recovery coach curriculum and workforce integration we're talking about. So let's talk about family recovery, family support. What are some beliefs within that space that may be fed by religion? It may be fed by our affiliation with a 12-step culture or our specific recovery pathway, whatever that is, some beliefs. Okay, Jerry, I'm gonna snack that one. What are some beliefs? I'll give you one, or what's the first one that comes to your mind? Let's say we're talking about 12-step recovery, Al-Anon. What are some of the maxims that might get thrown out there? Tough love. Right on. Right on. Thank you so much. Let's unpack that. Let's unpack tough love. And I've been there, because before I had a chaotic, pathological relationship with substances, I had elder siblings and other family members with whom I had to practice familial recovery orientation, and often it included tough love, and leads to some of my deepest regrets in my family recovery personally. So we could have a belief that any help that I give is enabling. That's a belief. And underpinning that, you may have a value that you're wanting to support real change and protect your loved ones from harm. You want to maintain emotional safety, healthy boundaries, and peace. Those are the values. Those are classy values. They're steady values. You believe in self-motivation and readiness for change, autonomy, self-efficacy. Those are the beliefs. Those are the values underpinning, but the belief is, if I give any help, it's enabling. I detach, they have to hit rock bottom before they can find recovery. Those are the beliefs, but those beliefs eventually get displaced with connection can be maintained without codependence. Detachment is one tool, not a universal tool. Risk reduction and compassion protect wellness. Evidence-based support, like housing, medications, emotional connection, is not enabling. And I'm using the words codependent and enabling, even though they aren't in my lexicon anymore as a professional, but they are part of the culture that has fed some of these beliefs that may no longer serve us or the people that we are serving. People change at different stages and in different ways. Hope can spark motivation before a crisis. Recovery is not one size fits all. So you may have been brought up through a culture that may have maxims or statements that try to reduce complex ideas into like simple truths, and they become your beliefs. And underpinning those are values that are really good. A desire for wellness, a desire for people to find freedom and health and stuff. But what we discover is the beliefs themselves can become wonky as we get new information, as we get new experiences. And I can only hold up my own practice as an example that I have changed incredibly over time. Anybody else in your practice as a peer recovery coach, or if you're not a peer recovery coach, a clinician who's supervising or employing peer recovery coaches, has your practice changed over time? Have you been in it long enough to say, I can't believe I used to do that, or I can't believe I used to think that or believe that, right? It honestly didn't take long for me. It was within the first 5 years, I was already pivoting. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm going to jump right back in real quick, because what I'm hoping also is to hear from everybody what you're doing to help your people set boundaries, to help yourself set boundaries, what you're doing to make these ethical decisions when they start to feel a little conflicted. Someone may have a primary need like food, clothing, shelter, transportation, imminent needs related to safety, and but you don't have that, or you don't do that, or your organization may have a policy of we don't go there, or you may have a cultural belief that says if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to get it, right? These are ethical quandaries we have in our practice, where sometimes our cultural beliefs or our recovery pathway beliefs come into conflict with our credential, conflict with our organizational policies and procedures. So I'm going to talk to you real quick before we jump into that about, let me share, let me get rid of this and share, and we're coming right down the pike here to the end and getting some sharing. Where do ethics come from? So ethics, it's a short word, but when it comes to our professional ethics, there's a lot of ingredients in the soup. Where does it come from? Y'all are the experts. What are the sources of our ethics? What did Hippocrates say? Doctors, Hippocratic Oath, what are those? Bioethics, anybody know? First of all, do no harm. Everybody familiar with non-maleficence, do no harm? Did you learn that in your peer curriculum? Yeah, we all learn it at some point, and we learn what comes next. We learn beneficence. So there you got the binary lodestars, the two full pillars, do no harm, do good. In my education, these were the only ones that were taught to me. Does anybody know that there's two more in medical bioethics? And what the other two are? No? I didn't either. And then one of the things that I pursued was a social work education. So my MSW education was very informative and taught me a lot of stuff that I didn't know before. So new information, pivoted, changed my practice. One of them is critical. If any of y'all are working in street outreach and risk reduction or anything like that, what's the big A? Type it in. This is a learning and sharing hour, y'all. What's the big A? Autonomy. Autonomy. That is one of the pillars of our core and almost ancient bioethics, autonomy. And you know what the fourth one is? It's almost a naughty word, but not quite yet. Justice. Autonomy and justice. Autonomy is that the peer with whom we are working, they make decisions about their wellness, they make decisions about their life, and we support those decisions within the scope of our knowledge and practice. We encourage, we make recommendations, but in the end, the patient, client, participant, peer is driving the bus. And we want that. We want self-efficacy as the outcome. We want personal empowerment as the outcome. We obviously want the folks with whom we are working no longer to need us at all. And then justice is this business of making sure the good medicine that we carry with us, everybody gets the chance to come get them some. That's justice. So that's at the core of our ethics. Bioethics, anybody know the SAMHSA core recovery principles? And I hate to call them the SAMHSA core recovery principles because you're like, who's SAMHSA? You know, y'all know who SAMHSA is, but it's a federal organization. But these core recovery principles came together through a consensus process of a whole bunch of people like us coming to DC, hollering back and forth about what is the definition of recovery? What is the core principles behind recovery? One of them's really important in this curriculum and important to our funder at OVC, and that one is the big H. What's that? That's my age. Oh my God. Come on, y'all know. And one of the great thing about peer recovery coaching is authenticity. So this person that you're seeing right now, you might be feeling some kind of way like what's going on here, but this is me and this is what you get. And my organization hired me for me, and I celebrate that. And all that that brings. Hope, hope, person driven, many pathways, holistic, peer support, mutuality, authenticity. These are all the core principles. Your state's peer credentials. You may be credentialed in one state, the ethical considerations that go behind those, not just for peers, for prescribers, for social workers, for LPCs. Everyone has a state credential. There are many of us who also have national credentials, and they have their own ethical codes. You have your organization's policies and practice, that sometimes your organization may have a policy that creates inter-ethical conflict. You may have an organization that has a policy around what you do with an individual when they do this, and it directly conflicts with your credential or with your personal values. What do you do? How do you navigate that decision? It's not super easy all the time. And then you're in the mix. Your personal values, your lived experience, they can support compassionate best practice. They can also get in the way of compassionate best practice if we haven't learned to moderate or navigate those. Okay, there's the soup. It's all good. It all helps. We get a foundation, a recovery-oriented framework. We get role clarity. We get accountability and legal compliance in our organization, so they're sustained, they're still here. And then we get in our core role authenticity, which creates that empathic connection, that special sauce that we have as peer recovery coaches. It's all good. The last thing I'm going to lead you with, and then I'm going to leave you with a couple tools, and then we're going to talk, I hope. The next one is learning to manage ourselves. So within us, we have a cultural identity, a cultural affiliation with our recovery pathway and all the passion that that brings and the beliefs that that brings and the values that underpin that. We also have our professional credential. We also have just all kinds of stuff in the mix. And we also have biases sometimes against different types of people. It may have come from our own anecdotal experience. We may have had an individual in our younger life that was most unkind to us, and we now have tracks laid in us that when we walk into a room with an individual who reminds us of that individual, we start to feel some kind of way, even if we're not aware of it. We may not give compassionate best practice, that best medicine that we have. So I'm going to give you quick, easy tools on learning how to walk into that room with any individual and leave with no regrets. And I have so many regrets in my practice not having these tools. The first one is education. No matter your recovery pathway, no matter your credential, learn everything. Nothing that you learn is going to bring down your house of cards. There are some people that will sanctify their knowledge or belief system, and any new information is seen as heretical. You know, we don't do that. We feed information. Give me more information. Learn all you can. Education is one of the biggest things that will fight against our treating anyone in a stigmatizing way. Empathy. Some of us may not have a whole lot of that and think maybe we never will, but I'm telling you that it has an actionable component, and that my recovery, now a 20-year process of improved health and wellness, I have noticed I have become a much more empathic individual. And one of the tools that I use is grandma's wisdom. She says, put yourself in their shoes, shifting perspective. We may look different, have different experiences entirely. And when we first walk in that room, our first inclination may be, how could she do that? Or why did she do that? Or he, whatever. You take just a moment. You place yourself within the context of their life experience on this blue marble, and you may not do anything regrettable, and you may give that best medicine of yourself. And while you're doing that, take a big old deep breath. Some of the hugest, most destructive potential mistakes in my life have been derailed by a simple sucking in of some oxygen. And maybe, you saw the Rage movie where the character goes, goose faba, right? Do that. Emotional regulation will help you get out of any sticky situation. An empathic exercise, and as much knowledge on board as you possibly can. And finally, your compass is your ethics. So if you haven't read thoroughly the ethical code underpinning your CPRS, your CRSS, your PRSS, FC, PRC, whatever it is, read it. Read it and align your decisions with it, and seek supervision. And we don't do this alone. And outside of supervision, seek peer-to-peer support. We get to talk to each other. We get to talk to each other in a vulnerable way and tell someone, you know what, working with this person makes me feel some kind of way, or I'm faced with this decision that's a little wonky and I'm not sure if I should do it or not. You've just outed yourself with a group of peer-to-peer. You talk to a supervisor about it. These are the tools I want to throw at you real quick before we get into let me turn this off. Some more conversation. I want to tell you what Heather's going to be sending out to you. Let me grab my boom. All right, the first thing that we're going to be sharing is desktop 2. Y'all may already have on board an ethical decision-making framework or process or flow chart. My first introduction to this was reading Bill White's writing back in 2013. I found some old writing of his where he talked about ethical decision-making frameworks. And I've seen more and more over time where we can get on paper, turn it into a flow chart. And this one starts with, are you feeling some kind of way, feeling unsure? Is there anything internally, that voice saying, yeah, this isn't really a super clear decision that I have to make. We define the issue. Often we haven't gathered all the facts, so we go about gather the facts, exploring our options. We evaluate the potential harms, the potential helps to others. Our decision minimizes as much harm and maximizes as much help. And we also make sure that it promotes autonomy and it's just oriented in its distribution to everyone. And more and more and more. Now I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to give away everything because I'm sending it to you. And here's a boundary setting checklist. So we're working with people that we have a closer relationship, an equal relationship with, that maybe our clinical counterparts and administrative folks have no idea what that's like. And we're being asked to do things that puts us in a close connection with folks. But as we talked about boundaries earlier, there professionally is a time where you can turn off your phone. You may have an underpinning belief that if a hand reaches out and I'm not there to grab it, I'm going to lose what I got, because that's try to let go of that belief. Hold on to that belief maybe within your recovery culture, but as a professionalized peer with lived expertise, we get to clock out. We do. And I know it's not easy, but we can do it. And what you'll notice about this boundary setting checklist is it really starts with, do I know what I am? Do I know what a peer support is, a peer recovery coach is? Does my peer, patient, client, participant know what my role is? Am I fully savvy to my credential, my organization's policies and practice? Uh, have I set a working agreement with the people with whom I'm working? And weekly check-ins on the nature of your relationships, how you're using self-disclosure, because all of us have to self-disclose. It's part of our credential. We have to share bits of ourselves as it relates to recovery. Are we mindful of what bits of ourselves we share and for whom it is the most benefit? Is it benefiting me? Is it benefiting them? We get to check that off the checklist. And it's got some red flags and some self-care questions and a big old reminder at the end. So that's coming your way. And
I actually already threw it into the chat, so nobody has to wait, but we will still send out
oh,
the copy with follow-up.
oh, you have PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. There they are. And also to know that these have been created under federal grants. And so they're public domain. They're yours. You can tweak them because honestly, this is Donald McDonald that made these based upon my education experience and my orientation to the world. And it's always possible. I might have had a little blind spot on one of them. So you change it, make it yours. And we're going to have one thing we're definitely going to have by the end of this is a link to evaluate this experience. But I believe right now is an opportunity for us to have some open conversation about ethical practice for peer recovery coaches, boundary setting for peer recovery coaches, and what's right with y'all. What are you doing in this area? What are you facing challenges with and might need some mutual support from one another? Or putting us to work to do a little TA around giving some more tools out. And that's when I shut up. So please holler into the mic. What's right with you? And Heather went ahead and put the survey in right now, so we can go right up to the wire. I see Larry typing. I see Larry thinking. I'm excited to see what Larry's typing. No pressure.
This is a very quiet group.
It sure is.
And
Yeah.
I know some of these folks, and they aren't that quiet usually.
Oh,
I have a question. So most of my work as a peer is from way back in the day when I was young, working mostly in youth development. And since that time, I've encountered a framework on boundaries that has two things that I found extremely helpful, no matter where your boundary setting prompts come from. And that is to have clear conditions and consequences. So the conditions is what it looks like when you're upholding the boundaries, and the clear consequences that are restorative are what happens when the boundary is breached. Do y'all ever talk about that, and what does that look like?
right on. And that can be part of our working agreement at the outset. So what does that? Does everybody use a working agreement at the beginning of this is my role, here's my expectations of you. We are confidential, but here's what I must report to my organization other than that. So the working agreement, we often call it in peer recovery coaching. Many of our trainings probably started with one where we put up on the wall everything we agreed to. Only one person gets to talk at a time, respect other people's opinions, working agreement. Are there peer recovery coaches in this training? Yes. Okay. Cool. 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 Wanted to make sure if maybe I was just hollering at a completely unwashed room of people, and I use unwashed in the sense of not knowing. All right. All right,
I have a
Larry.
question.
Well, hold on, Larry. Larry threw one in there. I would just talk, but this mic does. Okay, Larry's mic's not working real well, but Project Lazarus, I'm deeply familiar with you, Larry. I live near your neck of the woods. I do the usual peer support stuff with our male clients, but I also facilitate the Vivitrol program for the male inmates in custody here at Wilkes County Jail. It's our jail-based MAT program. I do web visits with different inmates every week. It's pretty cool. Right, that's excellent practice. Do you set any boundaries with these with the peers you're working with there? Or any working agreements? What's the deal with confidentiality? Because in a justice setting like that, I mean, imagine someone telling you something that could potentially get them into conflict while they're incarcerated. But as a peer, that's between you and them. And their knowing that creates a stronger connection. That's where our medicine is best. Karen, you were saying something.
It's just a question that I pose. You know, I'm not a peer recovery coach, but as a licensed certified professional, you know, I'm very used to ethics and all that. But I know working with many peer recovery coaches, I understand what those are for peer recovery coaches. But this project's a little bit different in that families are involved,
Yep.
and serving different family members. And some of this discussion I've had with some of our communities is about navigating how that might create some angst for peer recovery coaches, knowing that you have other members of the family, which is a little different than what may have been done. So I'm just curious if some of the peer recovery coaches on the call have experienced that, and how they tried to navigate that.
When you're both working with the individual resolving their relationship with
Yes.
substances and their family members, and how do you make
Yes.
those boundary decisions, ethical decisions?
Mm-hmm.
It's come up a lot. I wonder if anyone's doing that out there. And anyone with clinical experience working with families, what was the foundation of setting those boundaries too?
And I've experienced that in my clinical practice,
Sure,
working
sure.
with children and families as well. So I know it does create a lot of angst at times and has to be you have to navigate through that. It wasn't always easy. So I was just curious to, as this project rolls out and our peer recovery coaches begin serving, you know, the whole family, have they, you know, had discussions about or experienced it?
I'll say, since we talked about this yesterday, Karen, at Cinecor, which is where I work, and several of the people on here, we are moving toward that by initiating a program, Families First program, where we're going to start involving the families. And I know for the RSPS that I have talked to about it, they are nervous about it because, they're trained that the client is the client and the family is not the client because they're the family. So we have experienced that, but the good news is we're working on a program to address that, and we can implement it across the foundation, but we do cross that all the time.
Brilliant. So setting up, a framework for making those decisions is the best way to go. Oftentimes we enter into practice like this and we hope it doesn't happen. The conflict happens, but this will make it so much easier. Whitney, I also work with Lazarus, family recovery coach, support families impacted, walk alongside family members. All right, Whitney is family recovery coach, offering guidance, education, emotional support, regardless of where their loved one is in the process. Right on. New, still learning. That's wonderful. Yeah, family members driving the bus, and it's also, it's not always in a parallel recovery process. Sometimes it is, often it's not. Sometimes the primary individual recovers and the family doesn't. Yeah. So you're dedicated, Whitney, to the family. That's your primary gig. All right. People telling you why they've been incarcerated, possibly incriminating themselves further. You include follow-up phone calls in the working agreement, check-ins, arrange to happen weekly or so. You set an agreement with incarcerated people to come and have an office visit with you immediately. You set an expectation, we're going to have this relationship, but I expect you to come and see me as soon as you re-enter. And what's great about working agreements is that's what they are, as agreements. So in this moment of clarity and connection, uh, we say, is that a good idea? Are you willing to do that? Yeah, you betcha. And maybe we even go a step further and say, like, why? What's the good medicine behind this individual coming? Here's the benefit to you and why. So we can get them engaged here and work on a recovery plan, right? You could talk about the potential harms of not, engaging. I don't know if there's any harms with engaging with you upon return, but sometimes there are potential harms, and we get to talk about those too. Whether it's you're working in a space that could potentially maybe you are co-located with law enforcement, or maybe there's drug negotiations going on in the parking lot and stuff. So potential threats. So we get to we get to do informed consent along with our clinical partners as well, because when we share medicine with folks, we get to tell them why. This is the potential benefit for you, and these are the potential risks. And I do a whole other training on the benefits and risks of recommending mutual aid meetings like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and the many other ones. A friend of mine and I did a presentation at the RX Summit. We're doing it at the ATOD Summit as well. So we get to tell people why we're recommending a mutual aid meeting, and not because it's sanctified, not because, well, just because, but we must unpack why. Yes, connection will give you this process of walking in step with folks with common goals may give you this. Data show, and you could pull out the Cochrane review on sustaining that goal. For some, the goal is abstinence, and data show, if you get together with folks, you achieve goals together. And you can also talk about the potential harms, and my partner and I get into that as well, like 13th stepping. Ain't nothing wrong with telling folks you might run into a 13th stepper. We empower our participants, clients, peers to say, this is the good medicine you're going to see at these meetings. Here's the potential harms. We empower folks. But I'm going off on a tangent of my ethical practice that I didn't embrace till later in my practice. I used to be one who said, go to a meeting if you want to live. And I didn't really know why. And now, as a professional, credentialed person, I have to unpack the why. And I have to be prepared if they say no. I don't want to go to that meeting. I've tried it, it didn't work. That's like a patient saying, I've tried this medicine, it didn't work. What else do you have? Well, we have something else. It's not usually as effective, or it's potentially as effective, but would you be willing to try this? That's what we get to do as peers. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, nods. Yeah, I mean, I learned this stuff so late in my practice. I allowed my cultural identity to kind of trump my professional ethics at times. But I get to bring all that grief to you, and hopefully you won't have to. Anything?
I was
Yes.
just going to say thank you. Thank you so much for this really helpful information, and for those that have contributed to the conversation. I'm Karen Johnson, and our team has been working on writing the curriculum, and I think the Family Centered Peer Recovery Services module has really wrestled with this topic that that everyone is talking about. So those shared agreements that anyone might have, or checklists for, I love the two tools you shared, Donald, very helpful. But any agreements that get to this, what Karen Yost brought up, and how we navigate the boundaries and the ethical considerations related to working with a peer and then their family, so that the client is also the family. If there's any other, documents that can guide that practice. I think in our calls with teams and creating the curriculum, we've learned that some organizations in our cohort are farther along in that, and some are really just starting. So any tools that anyone has to share would be really helpful.
Please. And as recovery-oriented organizations, you know how much we love to share. There's
Yeah,
some
yeah,
folks
yeah.
that get stingy with their stuff, but I've never encountered that in a recovery.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Just putting the request out there in case others hadn't received that request, because it's just really
Please.
helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything you have to share around ethical decision-making, boundary setting, or whatever you'd like to share to improve the impact of peer engagement and the sustainability of our workforce as well.
What I'm hearing, as I said, is this, it's newer to folks. The part about adding the family as the client and figuring out the boundaries and the ethics around that is just newer to some of our teams. So, which is what this grant's all about, creating that model.